Hello, everyone. Hi, Ran. Hi, Arun. Thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure to have you on board in this very special webinar about software supply chain, specifically for the automotive industry. This is the first time that we're doing an industry-specific webinar. Before we start talking about the real stuff, let's introduce everybody's here. Arun, let's start with you. First of all, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So, Arun de Souza is an award-winning thought leader and keynote speaker with over 2 decades of experience as a CISO in the automotive industry. He has developed and implemented award-winning programs for identity lifecycle management and IoT security. His areas of expertise include identity management, zero trust, cloud computing, strategic planning, risk management, and privacy. Arun has earned numerous industry accolades, including CISO Hall of Fame Award by the Global Cyber Startup Observatory, and Top Global CISO Award by Cyber Defense Magazine. Again, thank you very much for being here with us. Ran. Ran is the VP of Strategy and Product at Argus Cybersecurity. He is a global leader in automotive cybersecurity. In this role, Ran oversees the product strategy, roadmap, and planning for all Argus product lines, including the recently launched DevSecOps platform, in-vehicle security solutions, fleet protection technologies, and anti-theft solutions. Prior to joining Argus, Ran held various leadership positions in the cybersecurity sector, including a tenure at Microsoft Security, where he led the development of an innovative integrated security solution for the IoT devices. At Checkpoint, Ran led the innovative XDR solution from inception, contributing to the protection of corporate enterprises and governments worldwide. A pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
60 seconds on myself. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Scribe Security. Scribe is a provider of software supply chain security platform, applying the concepts of continuous assurance and zero trust to protect software. Before that, I co-founded and served as the managing partner at Resilience Cybersecurity, which was a cyber and cryptography professional services firm. And before that, I also served as a VP at Argus Cybersecurity for 3 years. Argus is a cybersecurity company for automotive, but I've led the aviation business units there. And today I'm doing Scribe. So let's start with a short background about how did we get here, how cars and cybersecurity, which used to be very different domains, converged, and how specifically safety and security converged to be one thing in the automotive industry, especially now with all the autonomous fleets and autonomous cars that are actually computer on wheels. And the best person to lead us to this domain is Arun. So Arun, this is the question for you. Please take it from here.
Thank you, Ruby. The convergence of technology and connected vehicles in the fourth industrial revolution has raised automotive cybersecurity to a mission-critical global issue. Manufacturers across the world must demonstrate a laser focus beyond data protection and privacy to being guardians of human lives, like you noted, Ruby. Now, the modern day era of connected and autonomous vehicles elevates automotive cybersecurity to mission critical cornerstone for cybersecurity and safety assurance. Software vulnerabilities have the potential to be exploited by bad actors, resulting in collisions and life threatening scenarios. the need to design and deploy the appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards across the software deployment lifecycle, popularly called the SDLC, and minimize exponential risk has raised the stakes for all auto manufacturers. Now, within a connected car, the inherent complex array of interconnected software, sensors, is a gateway to potential cyber threats. The need to protect against unauthorized access to vehicle systems by hackers and bad actors is imperative to avoid or eliminate catastrophic consequences, including but not limited to loss of human life and injury, running the gamut from privacy breaches to subsume control of auto operations. For reference, cyber attacks on cars have soared 225% in the past 3 years for Upstream, a cybersecurity and data management platform. Now, with that preamble, autonomous cars are dependent on complex software algorithms to navigate and make split second decisions. Software vulnerabilities may enable software compromise, which in essence endangers passengers, pedestrians, and other vehicles. Digital trust is necessary in the modern day, as illustrated by the public's response to classic IT hacks and breaches in the past. I think Ran will take us through some of those coming up shortly. Valuing and fulfilling people's trust in these game changing technologies is absolutely imperative. The table stakes are extremely high for the automotive industry from a dual perspective, what I call the two prime directives. Number one, assure trust and confidence for vehicle owners globally, and then provide tailwinds to propel connected and autonomous vehicle development forward safely and securely. Thus, it must be noted that one or more cybersecurity incidents in the world can imperil gravely these two prime directives, right? So, in closing for this particular introduction, the quest to safeguard modern day vehicles against cyber attack, we have a host of measures ranging from certificates, data encryption, secure authentication, to intrusion detection systems, is essential to effectively balance innovation and human safety. Regulatory agencies worldwide are intent on promulgating and mandating rigorous automotive cybersecurity standards for compliance. Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you, Arun, for this very elaborative background. I think that's a very good way to enter into this domain of cybersecurity and automotive. Now, we are focusing on software supply chain, and the software supply chain is one subdomain of cybersecurity. And Ron, here I want to address the next question to you. Focusing on software supply chain attacks, can you tell us a little bit why the automotive industry is more susceptible to such attacks, specifically, maybe more than other industries or the IT industry?
Certainly. Thank you, Ruby. So first, thank you, Arun. It's what you pointed is we see the same. In the last couple of years, we have seen a notable surge in cyber attacks targeting the automotive sector. That's certainly a trend that we also identify. Supply chains within the automotive industry experience actually the highest number of detections, by the way, across different supply chains, because it's obviously not just that unique to automotive, but in automotive, and we'll discuss it, I guess, later on, supply chains are a critical element within the overall industry. That's, every OEM manufacturer uses sometimes hundreds of different subcontractors, tier ones, tier twos, and so on. So this is a major concern across many of our customers because we work in this industry. They are very much concerned And according to most of them, actually, I think there's a recent survey showed that almost 2/3, I think it was exactly, the exact number was about 64, 65% of automotive industry leaders believe that their supply chain is vulnerable to cyber attacks. Many businesses understand that they are not well prepared for the connected era of cars, and that's a major concern. Now, before we jump into some examples or discuss it in a little bit more detail, maybe let's first explain what a software supply chain attack is all about, right? So basically, a software supply chain attack is a cyber attack where malicious actors compromise the software development or distribution process, by the way, to insert malicious code into otherwise legitimate software. Distributing this compromised software can lead to potential security breaches or other security risks. The ability to take control over your car and concerns and threats like that. So these attacks can target various points in the supply chain. It could be in the source code, in different repositories, in your build processes or update mechanisms. For example, it could, hackers can try to attack different points in the development process. Open source specifically presents the highest risk of supply chain attacks, because this is obviously open source projects often rely on numerous, sometimes unknown contributors, third-party libraries and other components, which may not always undergo the usual rigorous security vetting that you would expect, at least internally, or you can implement internally. And attackers can exploit vulnerabilities in these components very easily. So that's why open source, for me, represents the biggest concern. Now, specifically talking about the automotive industry, first I mentioned before the complex supply chain. The automotive industry relies on a vast and very intricate network of suppliers and sub-suppliers, tier 1, tier 2s, sometimes even tier 3s. This complexity creates basically multiple entry points. So it's very easy to find an entry point which is not well guarded. And eventually you can trickle all your way up to the OEM itself. Now, on the other hand, exactly like also you mentioned, and I actually have a slide for that. I can use this one just to at least give some ballpark numbers, if you will. When we talk about the extensive use of software in modern vehicles, we see that the numbers are amazing. Because of SDV, software-defined vehicles, more software is used. And basically, the attack surface is now much, much bigger than it used to be. And it's only going to grow, exactly like you said, Arun, with autonomous driving, autonomous vehicles. It's only going to grow and become easier. Connectivity adds to that, because modern vehicles are now connected to the internet, and basically it's opening the door to hackers to take control. But don't forget the other surfaces, such as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and cellular networks. It's becoming easier and easier. The attack surface is growing basically every day. I mentioned extensive use of third-party software, which is also very common across multiple industries. In the automotive industry, it's highly driven by the economic pressure. Reducing costs and speed of production that is required sometimes lead to shortcuts and other security, well, not the best security practices, let's say it this way. So rigorous testing and validation of software are time consuming, they're expensive, and some, let's say, certainly not the top tier suppliers, but sometimes leave them aside because it's too expensive, and that's a major concern in the industry. Last but not least is the long product life cycle, right? It's a car. At the end of the day, a car, the average life cycle of a car is about 15 years now. It's going down a little bit. Sometimes it's 13, 14, but we're talking many years. Think about software that was developed 15 years ago. Security wasn't even an issue back then. So probably no one thought about, security by design, shift left, all these new words and new terms. No one thought about them. So often you'll see insufficient security measures that were implemented, and it's a major issue in this industry.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron, that's really great. I just had a couple of things. You talked about the supply chain and, the extended automotive supply chain ecosystem has like an enormous amount of suppliers, right? And as we have a famous saying, the chain is as strong as its weakest link. So any chinks in the armor of any supply chain constituent can be a pathway for exposure to software and or hardware vulnerabilities to automobiles. Therefore, as you noted, it's paramount to ensure that ecosystem vendors and suppliers have strong security. Now, that's easier said than done. I realize that, right? Whereas it's complex endeavor, it is critical to have a periodic review of third-party policies and practices, and to the extent possible, have security and risk questionnaires, and even I hope one day comes a common framework for auditing suppliers so that we can assess where they are at, right? And of course, obviously, if your company of any kind, a third-party risk management platform is very important to provide a balanced scorecard of cyber risk across the entire cyber supply chain ecosystem.
Excellent points. I agree.
Indeed. I would add, Arun, to your point, that I think that from an attacker perspective, it is very cost effective to take the attack vector of software supply chain, mainly because of two reasons. The first one is that the biggest OEMs have very big budgets and very big security engineering teams, and they are doing a fairly good job in protecting themselves, in protecting the perimeters, and they have a lot of resources to invest in this. And small companies that are tier 2, tier 3 have much less resources. They have innovation, but they don't have the awareness and sometimes the regulatory requirements and the resources overall to invest in it. And it is much easier to attack them and through them to get to the tier 1s and to the OEMs. So this is one reason. And the second reason is that the earlier that you get in the software supply chain, the wider, usually the wider your impact is. So, for example, if I'll provide a few examples from, not from the automotive industry, but from the last 3 years, then the recent XZ utils that was almost inserted into almost all of the Linux distributions in the world could reach millions or maybe multi-millions of computers and ECUs. And in the SolarWinds case, they attacked the Orion agent, and then it reached 18,000 of their customers. And in the 3CX incident, actually, this was a double software supply chain attack. This was a communication company that was attacked by the North Koreans. They reached almost 100,000 of impacted. So from an attacker perspective, if you want to make a lot of damage and to make it very wide, to get into millions of cars, the best way is to just do it early in the supply chain. All right, let's move to what the governments and what the regulators are doing about this, and this is the compliance part. I mean, the compliance can arrive from governments and from institutions such as the United Nations and from others, but also from customers, right? If an OEM requires something, then if you want to continue doing business, then you need to comply. And here, Ran is a practitioner in a cybersecurity company that is obliged to such requirements. I'm very curious to hear your perspective on what the standards and the regulation of this specific industry are becoming.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe just before I answer that, I'll just again share one slide just to connect that to reality, by the way. I quickly pulled up an example where actually a supply chain attack impacted, I guess everybody knows Toyota, one of the biggest OEM manufacturer. And basically, in 2022, Toyota announced the suspensions of 20-something operations, operation lines across 14 plants in Japan due to a cyber attack on one of its suppliers. So it's exactly like you said, Arun and Ruby. You're as secured as your weakest link. And because this is a very long chain between all the tiers, it's very easy to exploit. Now, I'll go back to what you asked. I think it's actually on the, I'll use this one to cover, just there are actually now a lot of regulations that cover supply chain as well. But to kind of summarize, instead of going into the very details, because there is a lot, we just released a regulatory overview in different countries and different regulatory bodies, and it's already 350 pages long, and we haven't covered everything yet. So it's growing every year with more and more regulations and recommendations. But basically, cybersecurity regulations significantly impact the automotive industry in various ways. Basically, it's all about, or ultimately about, protecting consumers and increasing overall safety of cars. Again, exactly like you said, Arun, security and safety are basically the two sides of the same coin. It's equally important, especially now that cars are, like I said, software on wheels. So regulations basically drive fundamental change in the automotive cyber industry in, I would say, three different areas. First and foremost, we see a lot of what is now called shift left, security by design. There are different names for it, but basically the approach that addresses security early in the design and development process, like Ruby mentioned. The other aspect handled by the regulations is cybersecurity management throughout the vehicle lifespan. As I mentioned, the vehicle lifespan can, if just the life expectancy of the car on the road is about 15 years, and take a couple of years before the design and development of a new car, we're easily looking at about 20 years lifespan of a development. So it's important to address that early and throughout the life cycle, including post deployment. And the other important pillar that we see across multiple regulations is the extension of responsibility, both to the executive level, even the board of directors of the OEMs, as well as across the automotive supply chain. That's another major pillar in the new and emerging regulations. Now, you see here a couple of specific, very relevant, anyone in the automotive industry would recognize them, but UNR 155, that was adopted by the United Nations Economic Commission. This regulation requires automakers to implement a cybersecurity management system CSMS for anyone that uses the acronyms, to ensure that their vehicles are protected against cyber threats throughout their life cycle. ISO 21434 is a standard that provides guidelines for managing cybersecurity risks in vehicles, and it emphasizes the need for risk-based approach and best practices for security of automotive systems. So I can go on, in more details about NHTSA and best practices. I just highlighted the key elements, but like I said, the three pillars are very much common across all the different regulations, whether are in the US, in China, from the UN, or specifically to EMEA. And we see the same requirements again and again. Um, and basically these regulations, some of them already are in effect, some of them will come into effect very soon. And over time, they grow and become more detailed, and we see the thereby the enhancing trust of products. That's the goal, making sure that consumers feel safer and can trust the product that they are buying. And
Yeah.
therefore, I guess they are more likely to purchase vehicles from manufacturers that are adhering to these standards, and maybe later on, even we can see differentiation based on cyber security readiness of those manufacturers.
Yeah. Thank you, Ran. This was really helpful. And Arun, I'd like to ask you, as somebody who is in this industry, in the automotive industry, for more than 2 decades, and your experience, and you've seen how these regulations evolved throughout these decades. Can you take us into the history of how it evolved, how the regulator evolved from a safety issue into a
Mhm.
cybersecurity issue in this industry?
Absolutely. But first, I wanted to say, well said, Ryan. I particularly appreciated a couple of things that you talked about. One being that uh, cybersecurity and safety are two sides of the same coin, right? And then the notion of uh, trust, so that is really huge. So thank you for that. Now, from a historical perspective, automotive safety was under the purview of the engineering organization in many automotive companies, right? And this is days before the software-defined vehicles, like you, or the autonomous vehicles, as you said, ran, right? This is a new era now. However, as the demand and manufacture of connected and automotive cars started to rise, the fields of cybersecurity and human safety have converged. And in fact, I add one more sliver to your two-sided coin, uh, Ran, and that is data privacy is also huge too, because the amount of data that is being collected, people could advertise wrongly, you could have privacy violation, and so on. So privacy is also as well huge. So what's now happened is the fact that if you look at organizationally, the history of good, robust software defined lifecycle SDLC practices originated in the IT organization, right? So therefore, it's only quite natural that the engineering organizations would start to collaborate more and more IT function, because they had know the recipes, they've been there, done that kind of a thing, right? And when you throw the lens of data privacy regulations as well, that's a bit not so standardized. Sometimes data privacy is under legal, sometimes it's under IT, right? And however, IT is always front and center of it, and CISOs normally in modern companies, they are like the ship's captain. They're looking into the future, looking at all the rocks and the storms out there, namely the cyber threats. And that's why many companies for all these areas, the CISO becomes a trusted advisor to lead change and foster and promote good practices. So I think it's not only the convergence of the three areas of cybersecurity, data privacy, and safety by nature. It's become bigger than any one organization. And in fact, we need a cross-functional collaboration and a federation of resources, not only across internal functions, but across the entire supply chain ecosystem, starting from the tier one manufacturers till all these suppliers. And Ruby, I appreciate what you said earlier. Not everybody has the same budget, and whereas the big manufacturers have bigger budgets, the smaller suppliers don't have budgets, and therefore, let me submit something else to you. I think it's an opportunity for those that have to help those that don't have as much, and maybe the bigger manufacturers can take the opportunity to share best practices, even have seminars and things to do to help small suppliers. Because at the end of the day, the more you invest in strengthening the supply chain, everybody benefits, right? Hope that resonated.
Yeah. Thank you, Arun. It's really thoughtful. I think maybe just to conclude the regulation part, I think that we should mention that there is also a global, more general regulation that in the United States is led by the federal government, started by the Biden Executive Order 14028, and then further developed by NIST to become the NIST 800-218, or SSDF, Secure Software Development Framework, that is going to be applicable to all the critical infrastructure. And I think that aviation, transportation, automotive are going to be part of those. And in Europe, a little bit later, there is the Cyber Resilience Act that is also going to be applicable for the automotive industry, of course. And it talks about basically about shifting the burden of proving that a product is software is trustworthy to the shoulders of the software producer, whereas it was on the shoulders of the receiver. And I think these huge regulations that are not industry specific to automotive, rather more relevant for the entire critical infrastructure and regulated industries that the automotive is part of them, are going to influence greatly on the automotive industry just as well. All right, let's move on to cover briefly the best practices that we see today and that are emerging. And one, maybe you want to start with what is required today in the automotive industry.
Certainly, thanks. So I would say, again, focusing on software supply chain attacks, best practices in the industry focuses on several tools and technologies. First and foremost is about security testing. So static application security testing, tools that basically scan source code for security vulnerabilities. Basically, it helps you detect SQL injections, cross-site scripting, buffer overflows, stuff like that. Dynamic application security testing are basically tools that analyze running applications to identify security vulnerabilities based on databases of known vulnerabilities. These tools basically simulate attacks and find issues like security misconfigurations, authentication errors, stuff like that. Vulnerability management tools are also a critical part of the overall security strategy for supply chain attacks. It's basically a continuous process. That's how the regulations address it, because you also need to detect and alert on vulnerabilities detected. Also post-deployment, so when the car is already on the road. It's about identifying, classifying, prioritizing many vulnerabilities based on regular scans and obviously also updates or patching of detected vulnerability. Everything is based on SBOM, software bill of material. which is a critical element in ensuring the organization secure supply chain. But that's a critical element, maintaining an up to date, software bill of material. Another element that is often used in development processes is software composition analysis, basically because of the vast usage of open source, third-party components and code bases like that. It's a tool that also makes sure that outdated libraries and even licensing issues are alerted during the development process. Basically, putting all together, maybe with another element which is also very common today and mandatory, according to the regulations, which are in-vehicle agents. Basically, that's the other side of the mitigation strategy, because having something inside the car can basically help tie response playbooks and other capabilities to make sure that even virtual patching can take place even when the car has been released and is already deployed and being used. But the vision, I think, or what we see this industry going into is DevSecOps platforms, where you streamline the processes, automate all these security checks throughout the entire phase of design and development. It helps collaboration across the development between the development teams and the security teams and the CISO office, of course. It helps accelerate development because continuous integration, and you can do nightly tests and in the morning get full reports on what passed, what didn't pass, recommendations on what to improve. So improving this process, automating it by adopting an integrated DevSecOps platform can help organizations to better protect against software supply chain attacks and maintain agility and speed of development, basically.
Thanks, Ran. So I would like to add my insights to those lines, along those lines. So I think that what we are seeing for software producers in the last 20 years is basically more of the same. It's scanner-based technology. As you said, it's software composition analysis, SAS, DAST, and then IAST. And it's all about scanning code, and also the regulations that you have gone through. You can see that it's a lot about vulnerabilities. And this is really important. Actually, I don't think it's a solved problem today, even though the SAS are getting better, but there are many false positives and there is a lot of noise. And the problem today is many times how to make sense in all the noise. What we are seeing, and actually is this is in line with the Biden executive order and the SSDF, is that vulnerabilities are very important. They need to be managed. They need to be recognized, and throughout the entire life cycle of a product. But it's not everything, and it covers like 20% of the scope of the problem. There are many attack vectors in software supply chain that has nothing to do with code vulnerabilities. For example, if an attacker steals credentials of one of your developers, and now they get into the development environment, they don't care anymore of vulnerability. They can just do whatever they want. Okay, and we see actually most of the software supply chain attacks are when an attacker replaces one final image with another final image that is dealt with, that is tampered. And here, what we are seeing, some of the stuff is similar to what you recognized, Ran, like S-bombs are very important. And it is one thing to generate an S-bomb. Actually, to generate an S-bomb, it's almost a commodity today. There are many open source tools for this, and it is becoming more fundamental how you manage the SBOMs, how do you share the SBOMs, what do you make out of the SBOM? The SBOM is the JSON format. It's useless only if you build the different layers of security aspects over the SBOM, then it's becoming useful. So yeah, SBOMs are definitely a big thing in every new regulation that is going out, both self-generated SBOMs and third-party SBOMs that you either get from your vendors or that you just get an image and then you need to scan them and then you generate this SBOM for you. And also, I just want to recognize that there are many types of SBOM. You can take an SBOM from the Git, from the SCM, or from the build checkout, or for a final image, or from the admission controller. And every SBOM that you're taking from a different place is a little bit different. It has its own pros and cons, and the aggregated SBOM, so to speak, provides a better picture of what's going on in the code, both vulnerability-wise and license-wise. The other thing that is gaining in the last 2 years a lot of traction is ASPM. I think that it might be what you meant when you talked about the DevSecOps platform run. In the more wide, not industry-specific world, this is referred to as ASPM, or Application Security Posture Management, and this is one place where you ingest and orchestrate all the different scanners that you already have in place. And then there are the more newer frameworks and the methodologies that are out there, mainly by OpenSSF and by the regulators, that talk about how you make products secure by design and by default. And it's not exactly shift left. Shift left is really important, but what it means is I'm, as a security professional, don't understand a lot about development, so I will let my developers deal with it. But many times it does not work because the developers either don't understand security, or they don't care about security. They care about their KPIs, which is speed. And even if it's done right, it only covers known vulnerabilities in components, and this is like 20% of the scope of the problem. So a complementary approach is SDLC governance using guardrails. And guardrails are policies that are many times policies as code that are used and implemented directly into the CI/CD in a manner that a product that does not adhere to the policies, to the blueprints that you have put in place, that could be based on regulation, on customer requirements, or on your own secure SDLC policy, won't go through. And in a very deep manner, compliance is really part of it, because a compliance, if you think about it, it's a bundle of policies, and if you can verify and enforce at different stages throughout the process of the development, this bundle of policies, then you actually get an evidence-based compliance report automatically generated for every build, which is how modern compliance should be done. It's not SOC 2 or ISO 27001 that is done once a year. This is what continuous compliance is about. It's about attesting to the trustworthiness of your product continuously for every stage, for every build. And I think that the last piece in the puzzle, and this is also not really about vulnerabilities, it's about how to do tampering detection, how to detect unlawful or unwillingful changes, either in the code, in your product, like it has been done in the SolarWinds case, or in the XZ Utils case, where they have changed the code during the build process. And for this, no scanner in the world will help you. It's not about SEA, it's not about SAS, it's not about DAS. The only way to really understand if your Jenkins configuration file has been tampered, or if your build process has been exploited, is to monitor and track the integrity and the provenance of the code components, of the processes, of the tools that generate the code, of the machinery at every stage continuously, and sign everything all the time, including the context. And then you can see that an image is not the result of your build. It might be the result of somebody else's build, maybe the attacker, or that somebody changed your configuration file during the build process, etc., like the most sophisticated stuff. So I think that these approaches that are not coming from the traditional AppSec, but they are built on top of the traditional AppSec, on top of the traditional DevSecOps, and we see them starting to gain a lot of traction in the finance sector and in the highly regulated sectors, in defense, in aviation, and others. And they are making their way slowly but surely into the automotive industry as well. And that's where my 2 cents. Being respectful of your time and our audience time, I think it's a good time to move to the summary phase. And Arun, you started, so I will let you start the concluding remarks. How do you see the future? Where is this going?
As automotive cybersecurity evolves, the following 10 key tenets will be essential as we move forward on our journey altogether. Number one, mobilize security and privacy by design and default as a core tenet, and both of you talked about it earlier, to which I'll add zero trust rising. I think you talked about Ruby. Zero trust is absolutely essential, right? Number two, build a common framework for third party risk and audit management across the supply chain, because when we have that, it'll be much more better way to establish the provenance and the end-to-end safer software assurance. Third, adopt multi-layered cybersecurity defenses to combat cyber attacks and prevent intrusion. Right. For I think you talked about that ran earlier. Design and deploy risk-based prioritization for safety-critical vehicle control systems. Five is plan rapid incident detection and response, because we've got to protect lives, mitigate damage, and recover rapidly. And I think sharing best practices and playbooks across manufacturers and the supply chain be very beneficial there. Six, support cyber resiliency via robust and safe architectures. There is no choice. Human lives are at stake. And seven, remember the trifecta of people, process, and technology, right? It's not just a software problem or sensors and
Yeah.
hardware, and it is a people and business process like third party risk management and so on. And number eight is foster intelligence and information sharing across the industry, nationally where you are, but also globally across nations. I think we can all win if we believe in the power of federation better together. Nine is, collaborate for quick adoption of industry-wide lessons learned across the automotive industry. Something bad happens, what do we implement? Share with everyone so people can be faster and more resilient. And last of all, I think promoting consumer awareness and making them better informed and enabling manufacturer differentiation by cybersecurity capability can help uh, really increase the value to the consumer to build the trust that you talked about, Ran, and deliver the value and assurance that you talk, Ruby. I think it's paramount. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. Very good insights. Thank you for sharing them. Ran, can you provide your view of of the industry trends and what's ahead of us?
I'll take the compliance view.
Okay.
I'll echo everything that Arun said. I 100% agree with everything he said. From a regulatory perspective, I would say that we'll see a little bit of harmonization across the different regions. I don't think having different regulations in different countries can stay like this. But more importantly, we will see probably stricter standards specifically tailored for the automotive industry. Like you said, Ruby, regulation specific to autonomous driving and aspects like that. I believe that this is the next step, especially when autonomous driving will become a little bit more of a reality. And we'll probably see additional again, growing attack surfaces like V2X communications and other aspects like that, that will also be covered by regulations, over-the-air updates that are becoming more and more relevant. From a data privacy that you both mentioned before, we will see not just GDPR, we'll see the equivalent of GDPR in the automotive industry. There's no way around it. It's a critical element. The third aspect of the two sides of the coin, we'll need to find an analogy with three sides. Not a coin is not good enough now. And another thing that you mentioned that I would like to echo, supply chain integrity. There's no way around it. It's critical in the automotive industry. So I completely agree that it will be another important element, as well as collaboration. Like Arun said, we'll see all of this very soon.
Excellent. Okay, my summary is a joke. So I remember that I vaguely remember that in the 90s there was a kind of a debate between Steve Jobs, who was the CEO of Microsoft. Sorry, not Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Sorry, CEO of Microsoft, and a leader in the automotive industry. I don't remember who he was. I think maybe the CEO of General Motors. I'm not sure about it. And the automotive leader, if you remember back then in the 90s, we had the Windows 3.11 that crashed all the time, and we had blue screens. So the automotive leader joked about Microsoft and said that, you know, if that, sorry, it was the other way around. Bill Gates joked about the automotive industry, how slow it moves, how that it embraces the new innovation very, very slowly, and it takes like 8 years or 10 years to get a new model to the road, and because they have such strict QA and safety requirements. And then the automotive leaders talked about Microsoft and said that if they had Microsoft standards for QA then the car would break every day, and in order to restart it, you need to close and open again all the windows. And I think that we got there, right? I mean, now it just combined. I mean, a car is in many aspects, it's a computer, right? And the same standards that you once applied to software and IT and OT and IoT, now they just applied to cars, and vice versa. The standards that you need to apply to car safety-wise needs to be needs still to be there. And when these two very different industries meets, then interesting thing happen. And I think that solution-wise, at least, we are going to see all the best practices that you see from every software vendor, from Microsoft, from Google, from Amazon, from startups, making their way into the automotive industry. Ran, you talked about SaaS and DaaS and SEA and all the application security, and we are going to see a flood of software supply chain security making the way just as they making the way to any industry that software is a big part of it. Okay, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being with us, and hope to see you in person soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ran. Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you, everyone. It was a real pleasure.
Pleasure.